Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be discussing the second of 3 games for the Sharks in this rookie tournament, and this time they faced off against the Anaheim Ducks, who they actually managed to beat 5-4 in a 3-on-3 overtime, which I was actually pretty surprised to see. First of all, the 3-on-3 overtime, I did not know what the rules were going to be in this rookie tournament, but it seems as though it was NHL rules apply, and also the fact that they actually managed to defeat the Anaheim Ducks rookie team, or I guess I should say rookie team, because of the fact that Ducks team had about 3 full seasons of NHL experience, over 250 games between the players. I mean, players like Kiefer Sherwood and Jacob Larson have a multitude of games of NHL experience. Both of those players, or Kiefer Sherwood especially, will not actually be a rookie going into the next season. Sherwood playing around 50 games this past year. So I was pretty surprised to see the Sharks team with very, very little, if any, NHL experience actually be able to take this victory. So that was nice to see. But again, not really the point here, as the point is more looking at how the Sharks prospects performed. And before I get to the players who played in this game, I'll get to the players who did not play. First of all, Ivan Chekovich, who had gotten injured in the last few minutes of the game against the Coyotes the other day, didn't end up playing here tonight. While it wasn't a very serious injury, as he got cut, I think, by a high stick or potentially a puck, there's very, very little reason to take any sort of risk. This tournament means basically nothing in terms of results, so the fact that Chekovich isn't playing isn't really a huge loss for the team as a whole, and is more so somewhat disappointing that Chekovich will only get to play a couple of games, since he will likely be in the lineup on Tuesday. A couple players who I actually mentioned yesterday, Tony Sund as well as Thomas Gregoire, who I thought actually looked quite good against the Coyotes, did not get to play here tonight. That's not necessarily a comment on their skill level from the previous game, as of course in a rookie tournament that has very little riding on it, you mostly just want to get a good look at all of the players. For instance, the Sharks are bringing 3 goalies to the prospects to this prospect tournament, and all 3 goalies are going to start 1 game each. So it's not like because Shortridge won a game that you're going to go Shortridge all 3 games. No, you want to get a good look at basically all the players, with maybe a closer look on some of the players who you're looking to see potentially make the Sharks. That's why Chmelevski and Merkley and players like that are playing both games and will likely play all 3 games. So first, I will start off with Ryan Merkley, who was much improved from his game against the Coyotes, again showing off his offensive skills. There were a couple of moments where his passes were just mind-blowing and seemingly miles ahead of basically any of the other players on the ice, and his defensive game actually looked somewhat improved from the previous night. Not as many catastrophic errors. I'd count maybe 1 that was a pretty bad play in general, but otherwise he seemed to have a bit more defensive awareness. It's still, of course, rough around the edges, and that's what you would expect from Ryan Merkley. He's obviously not going to improve his defensive game substantially overnight, basically, but it was nice to see that there was this improvement, and he is becoming, better in that regard, because that's really the main problem with his game as a whole. Next would be Sasha Chmelevski, who I also thought was improved over the previous night, but the thing is that it was pretty minor improvements all in all. Sasha Chmelevski I didn't think was that great against the Coyotes. Again, he wasn't that great here against the Ducks, did get a goal, but if I was somebody who was watching this game coming in with zero knowledge of the Sharks prospects, Chmelevski wouldn't really be someone who I'd point to and say that player has a chance of making the Sharks team this next season, while, coming into this rookie tournament as someone who does know the Sharks prospect, I thought Chmelevski would have a decent chance. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be the case anymore. We'll see how he goes in the 3rd game, and we'll see if maybe, his reputation in a way in the Sharks system takes a bit of a hit based on this somewhat subpar performance in this rookie tournament thus far. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say subpar, it's been about average, but I was expecting a bit more from him. Next, another player who I mentioned yesterday, Mario Ferraro, who I said was likely the MVP for the Sharks in the previous game, not looking as good as he did in the previous night. Of course, that would be a big ask, but he still looked quite solid. Still a very solid game for Mario Ferraro, the offensive, the defensive. Made a couple of big blocks, ended up getting injured a couple of times off of those big blocks, missing a couple of shifts. So I still feel like he might be one of the more complete players that the Sharks have here on the back end, especially when you look at someone like Merkley, who is lacking a bit in that defensive side of the game. So I don't think Ferraro is going to be, someone who's going to make the Sharks team this next season, but he'll be very interesting to watch in the AHL, where he may be able to leapfrog a couple of the other Sharks defensive prospects who seemed rather close to being able to make it to the big team within the next couple of years. A couple of players who I didn't actually mention last game, Noah Gregor, I thought, had a pretty decent game. Him and Jake McGrew, I felt like played similar style of game. Certainly no really high-end performance from these two players, as you'd really expect from most of these Sharks prospects. Of course, the majority of them, besides someone like Ryan Merkley, were picked in later rounds. That's not normally where you find a lot of star power, so it's pretty expected that you're not going to get some top 6, like high-end type of skill ceiling players in those rounds. And so Jake McGrew and Noah Gregor looked pretty solid in this game. They could potentially be depth pieces moving forward for the San Jose Sharks, but nothing really spectacular. A player who I actually mentioned in my last video, Joachim Blichfeld, again, not too much of an impact. He had a very, very nice pass that led to one of the Sharks' goals, but otherwise not doing too much on the ice. And that could be a potential problem if he had a chance of making it to the NHL, because of the fact that there's going to be even less room for these things to happen. So you want to see someone making much more of an impact when there is more room in, let's say, a rookie tournament where these players haven't played much together and there isn't too much of a structure to the game. Finally, I will mention the goaltender, as it was Sawchenko who played this one. Had a pretty decent game, I guess you could say. Certainly looked a bit more composed, playing less so like an Antiniemi style goaltender like Shortridge had yesterday, and more so like a composed Martin Jones style goaltender. Made a couple of huge saves on breakaways in the overtime to be able to keep the Sharks alive long enough so that they could win it 5-4. And also, sort of in Martin Jones fashion, a couple of the goals that he did let in during regulation weren't that great. So all in all, I'd say an above average game, especially with those 2 saves in overtime, but nothing truly spectacular. Again, another goaltender like Shortridge who probably needs a few years to actually be able to mature and develop, and we'll see if anything could come of that. I wouldn't put my hopes up, but anything is possible. And the Sharks will conclude now this rookie tournament when they face off against the LA Kings rookies on Tuesday. That, as I said, the final game, and we'll see if players like Merkley, Chmelevski, they'll likely get another game. Shekovich will likely be back in the lineup, and we'll see who stands out for those ones. Class dismissed.